The first thing you notice is the silence. It's not the peaceful quiet of a sleeping house, the gentle sigh of a furnace kicking on, the soft rustle of a pet shifting in its bed. No, this is a different kind of silence. It's a thick, heavy blanket that smothers everything, a void that seems to swallow sound whole. It's the silence of a vacuum. And in that vacuum, you can hear the frantic, rabbit-like thumping of your own heart. That's how it started for me, on a night just like this one. A cold October night, where the wind didn't howl, but instead held its breath. That was the first warning. The second was the smell. It's a smell, you know, one that's intrinsically woven into the fabric of this season. It's the scent of decay, of leaves turning to mulch, of damp earth and the sweet, almost cloying perfume of something rotting. You smell it on the air when you walk through the woods, and you think nothing of it. It's nature's process. But when that smell seeps under your front door, when it coils through the vents of your home, that's when it stops being natural. That's when it becomes a violation. My name is Leo, and last October, I learned that the season doesn't just bring pretty colors and pumpkin spice. It opens a door, and sometimes something steps through. It began with the elm tree in my backyard. It was a magnificent ancient thing, a gnarled giant that had probably seen a century of winters. Every autumn, it was the first to turn, its canopy erupting into a blaze of fiery yellow. But that year it was different. The color was off. It wasn't a vibrant gold, but a sickly, jaundiced yellow, tinged with blotches of a deep, bruise-like purple. The leaves didn't fall in a gentle, swirling dance. They dropped like stones all at once in the space of a single windless afternoon. One moment the tree was full, the next it was bare, its skeletal branches clawing at a leaden sky. And piled in a perfect, concentric circle around its massive trunk was the entire season's worth of leaves, forming a crisp, unbroken mound. I didn't think much of it then. Just a quirk of nature, I told myself. A weird tree doing a weird thing. I should have grabbed a can of gasoline and a match right then and there. I should have burned the whole thing to the ground. But you don't. You rationalize. You explain it away. That's the trap. The next phase was the sounds, or rather the lack of them. The backyard, which was usually a bustling little ecosystem, went dead. No more squirrels chattering, no birdsong at dawn, not even the buzz of a late-season insect. It was that same profound silence I described, but now it was localized, focused on that patch of land dominated by the elm. Stepping into the backyard felt like stepping into a soundproof room. The noise from the street, a car passing, a distant lawnmower would just stop at the property line. It was unnerving, but again, explainable. Maybe a hawk had moved in, scaring the smaller animals away. See? The human mind is a master of self-deception. Then came the night the tapping started. It was a soft, polite sound at first. Tap, 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 like someone gently rapping a knuckle on the window pane. I was in the kitchen, washing the dinner dishes, and the sound came from the back door. I froze, my hands submerged in the soapy water. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. A patient, persistent summons. "Hello?" I called out, my voice too loud in the kitchen's quiet. The tapping stopped. I waited, my breath held, listening. Nothing. Just that crushing silence. I crept to the door, wiped a circle of condensation from the glass, and peered out into the darkness. The motion sensor light hadn't come on. The backyard was a pool of absolute black, the kind of dark that seems solid, substantial. I could just make out the hulking shape of the elm tree, a deeper black against the night. There was no one there. I chalked it up to a branch, though I knew, logically, the tree was too far from the house for a branch to reach. I went back to the dishes, my nerves jangling. And then it started again. Tap, tap, tap. This time it was faster, more insistent, almost impatient. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Who's there?" The tapping ceased. I strode to the door, flung it open, and flicked on the backyard light. The cheap yellow bulb flickered to life, casting a sickly glow that barely reached the base of the elm tree. The circle of leaves was still there, pristine and undisturbed. The yard was empty. A cold breeze, the first I'd felt all night, slithered into the kitchen, carrying with it that overpowering scent of decay. It smelled like an open grave. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and drew the blinds. I didn't sleep well that night. The following evening, the tapping returned, but it had moved. It was no longer at the back door. It was at my bedroom window on the second floor. Tap, 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 my blood ran cold. No branch, no animal could reach that window. I lay in bed, paralyzed, staring at the drawn curtains. The tapping grew more frantic, evolving from a polite knock to a desperate scrabbling, like long, brittle fingernails being dragged down the glass. I couldn't take it. I threw off the covers, marched to the window, and yanked the curtains open. There was nothing there, just my own pale, terrified reflection staring back at me from the black mirror of the night. And then movement, not on the window, but beyond it, down in the yard. The motion sensor light was on again, and in its pathetic yellow halo I saw it. The circle of leaves around the elm tree was shifting. It wasn't the wind. The night was still. It was as if something was moving beneath them, burrowing, causing the leaves to ripple and part in a slow, deliberate circle. A shape began to emerge from the center of the mound. It was pale and thin, like a long white root pushing its way up through the soil. It rose higher and higher, until it stood, a spindly, man-like figure, impossibly tall and thin. It had no face. No eyes, no mouth, just a smooth, featureless oval where a head should be. Its limbs were too long, its fingers like brittle twigs that twitched and spasmed at its sides. It was made of what looked like polished, bleached wood or perhaps bone, and it stood perfectly still, its blank face turned directly towards my window. I stumbled back from the glass, a strangled gasp catching in my throat. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. 911, the dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. What is your emergency? There's someone in my yard. A person or something. Can you describe the individual, sir? It's not an individual, it's tall, white, like a stick insect. It has no face. I knew how I sounded. Hysterical, crazy. Sir, I need you to calm down. An officer is on the way. I stayed on the line, my eyes glued to the window, but I didn't have the courage to look out again. I just listened to the dispatcher's calm breathing, a tiny anchor in a sea of terror. When the police arrived, their flashing blue and red lights painted my walls in frantic strokes. I ran downstairs and let them in. 2 officers, a man and a woman, their faces etched with the weary patience of people who have seen every brand of human weirdness. I babbled my story, pointing towards the backyard. The male officer, Officer Miller, went out with his flashlight, its powerful beam cutting through the darkness. He walked all the way to the tree, shone the light around, even kicked through the circle of leaves. "Nothing out here, sir," he said when he returned, brushing leaf fragments from his pants. No footprints, nothing disturbed. Probably just a shadow or a trick of the light. This time of year, the mind can play games on you. The female officer gave me a sympathetic look. "Have you been under a lot of stress lately, sir? Trouble sleeping?" They didn't believe me. Of course they didn't. I thanked them, my face burning with a mixture of fear and humiliation, and closed the door. I was alone again. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my marrow, that I had not imagined it. The next few days were a special kind of hell. The entity, the thing from the tree, didn't return to the yard. It had gotten what it wanted. It had been seen. Its presence was now inside the house with me, a constant suffocating weight. The silence became more profound, more menacing. The smell of decay grew stronger, now carrying a new, coppery undertone like old blood. And the rules of my reality began to bend. I'd walk into a room and feel an intense, localized cold spot. A pocket of winter that made my breath plume. Pictures on the walls would be ever so slightly crooked. When I knew I'd just straightened them, I'd find tiny, gritty piles of dark soil on the floorboards, leading from the back door into the living room. The tapping was replaced by a new sound. A soft, dry rustling like leaves being stirred, but it came from inside the walls. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. My world had shrunk to the 4 walls of my house, a prison I shared with a silent, malevolent roommate. I tried to research, to find some folklore, some myth that matched what I was seeing. I found nothing. This thing was its own unique horror. The breaking point came on a Thursday. I was sitting in my armchair, staring at the blank television screen, too exhausted to move, too terrified to sleep. The rustling in the walls had grown louder, more rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Swish, swish, swish. And then I heard my name. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't even a whisper. It was a voice made of soundless air and intention. A thought that was not my own, projected directly into my mind. It was a dry, rasping sound, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. "Leo!" I shot up in my chair, my eyes wide. "Who's there?" "Come." The voice, the thought voice, was coming from the hallway. I stood up, my legs trembling. I didn't want to go. Every cell in my body screamed at me to run, to hide, to break a window and flee into the night. But I was compelled. It was a physical force, an invisible hook in my mind, reeling me in. I walked to the hallway. It was dark, the only light spilling from the living room behind me. The rustling was louder here, a constant, chittering susurrus that seemed to emanate from the very air. At the end of the hall was the door to the basement. It was always kept closed. Now it was open a crack. A sliver of profound darkness beckoned from within. The thought voice came again, slithering into my skull. "Down!" "No," I whimpered, but my hand was already reaching for the doorknob. It was ice cold. I pushed the door open. The stairs descended into a pit of blackness. The smell that wafted up from below was unbearable, a potent mixture of wet soil, rotting vegetation, and that metallic tang of blood. "Down, Leo!" I flicked the light switch. Nothing. The bulb was dead. I pulled out my phone, my hand shaking so violently I almost dropped it. I activated the flashlight and pointed its beam down the stairs. The wooden steps were covered in a carpet of those same yellow and purple leaves from the elm tree. They crunched under my feet as I began my descent. The basement was a place of concrete and forgotten things. Old furniture shrouded in sheets, boxes of Christmas decorations, a rusty water heater. But it was transformed. The leaves weren't just on the stairs. They coated the floor in a thick, rustling carpet. They clung to the walls, forming a grotesque, organic wallpaper. And in the center of the room, the leaves were piled high, forming a nest, a bower. And in that bower it was waiting for me, the faceless man. It was crouched, its long, spindly limbs folded awkwardly against its body. Its smooth white head was tilted, regarding me with a featureless gaze that was more terrifying than any pair of eyes could ever be. The rustling sound was coming from it, a constant dry vibration. I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, the phone's beam trembling over the thing. I wanted to scream, but my throat was sealed shut. I wanted to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. It unfolded itself, rising to its full, impossible height. It had to crouch to keep its head from scraping the ceiling joists. It took a step towards me, its movement a series of jerky, unnatural clicks and pops like branches breaking. The thought voice filled my head, no longer a whisper, but a deafening roar of silence. "The vessel is empty." It raised one of its twig-like hands, and then I felt it. A pressure, not on my body, but on myself, on my mind. It was like a hook. The same one that had drawn me here was now digging deeper, trying to pull something out of me. My memories began to flicker at the edges of my consciousness. My first day of school, my mother's face, the taste of my first beer, all of them being tugged loose. A profound coldness seeped into my core. Not the cold of temperature, but the cold of absence, of negation. It was trying to hollow me out, to scrape my consciousness clean and leave nothing but an empty vessel, a shell. This was its purpose. This was the harvest of the fall. It didn't want my life. It wanted my home, the home inside my own skin. A primal survival instinct, something deeper than fear, finally broke through the paralysis. With a raw, guttural yell, I didn't turn and run up the stairs. I lunged forward towards the water heater. The thing was between me and it, but it was slow, its movements deliberate. I ducked under a sweeping, claw-like hand that whistled past my ear, and I slammed my shoulder into the side of the old water heater. It rocked on its rusty legs. I put everything I had into a second shove. With a groan of protesting metal, it tipped over, crashing onto the concrete floor with a deafening clang. The connection pipe snapped, and a geyser of scalding hot water erupted into the basement, spraying in a wide, hissing arc. The thing, the faceless man, recoiled. It didn't scream, it had no mouth, but a wave of pure, silent agony erupted from it. A psychic shriek that felt like needles being driven into my brain. The hot water sizzled and steamed where it touched its pale, wooden flesh blackening it, causing it to smoke. It stumbled back, its limbs flailing, crashing into its nest of leaves. I didn't wait. I turned and fled up the stairs, taking them 2 and 3 at a time. I didn't look back. I burst out of the basement, slammed the door shut, and shoved a heavy bookcase in front of it. My breath sobbing in my chest. I could hear it down there. A thrashing, scraping sound, and that psychic scream of pain and rage slowly fading, like a radio signal losing strength. I spent the rest of the night in my car, parked under a bright streetlight a mile from my house. The next morning I went back, armed with a can of gasoline I bought from the gas station. I didn't go inside. I went straight to the backyard, to the source. I doused the elm tree, the circle of leaves, the very earth around its roots. I threw a match and watched it all go up in a satisfying whoosh of flame. The fire burned hot and fast, and for a moment I thought I heard, not with my ears but in my mind, a final fading sigh of release. I moved out that very day. I never went back into the basement. I sold the house for a fraction of its value to a young couple who didn't ask too many questions, who were just thrilled to find a house in their budget. I told them there was a persistent damp problem in the basement. It wasn't entirely a lie. I live in a 10th floor apartment now, in a building made of steel and concrete, where the only thing outside my window is sky. I still have nightmares. I still startle at the sound of rustling leaves. And sometimes on a cold, silent October night, when the air carries that familiar scent of decay, I feel a faint, cold pressure at the edge of my mind. A reminder, because I didn't kill it. You can't kill the season. You can't kill the turning of the earth. You can only drive it back, force it to retreat. I burned its gateway, its anchor to this world. But a door, once opened, can never be fully closed. It's still out there, in the deep, silent woods, in the forgotten corners of old farms, in the vacant lot at the end of your street, where the weeds grow tall and a single twisted tree stands alone. It's patient. It's waiting for the air to turn cold, for the leaves to change to that sickly, jaundiced yellow. It's waiting for the silence to descend. And it's looking for a new home. So tonight, when you hear that soft, polite tapping at your window, don't answer. Don't even look. Just pray that your vessel is too strong, too full of life for it to empty. And pray that the rustling you hear is just the wind,